what would be required, and that rooms, parlors, or individual service rooms. So what we did was look at the usable square feet for reception, and we applied that 50 square, one space per 50 square feet that came up to the 45 required, as listed in your agenda. The applicant has submitted preliminarily a shared parking agreement. We are in conversation about what changes might be necessary to that. They're proposing a shared parking arrangement with other properties in common ownership, both the funeral home, as it is, again, the accessory to that main use, and also to the office park next door. So that is being currently reviewed by staff and will be also reviewed and looked at by the law department before anything would get formalized. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there a representative here? Yes, sir. If you could please step to the podium, state your name and address, and I'll swear you into the record.
My name is David Bogner, and I live at 34944 Shawn Drive, North Ridgeville. I have with me my wife and co-owner, Mary Beth Bogner, and our architect, Randy Smith. And I know.
I'm sorry, I need to stop you and swear you in.
Oh, go ahead.
Do you swear affirm the statements you're about to make in front of this Board of Zoning and Building Appeals for the City of North Ridgeville are true as you shall answer on your job or under the county's law firm?
I do. Thank you.
Please.
Okay. So I realize that from what we're presenting here, it sounds like we're asking for a lot. Okay, and I get that. The P5 zoning, in conversation with Guy over the years, we built 2 other buildings in the same district before, and that P5 zoning, when it was established, really didn't look at side street. It's really facing, all businesses facing Center Ridge Road, and so those setbacks are with the idea that something would be facing Center Ridge, and you have 500 feet of depth of the commercial, where this is a side street, and so it's still in the first 500 feet of commercial. So the requirements are really beyond reason. So that's why we need to come to before you, the Board of Zoning Appeals but when you look at the plan, if in my opinion, and I would hope you would agree, it all makes sense. Okay. But the reason why we want to build this is our funeral business has changed. Okay, over time, people are looking more for life celebrations where they can have food and so forth, and the funeral home doesn't really accommodate for that. So we want to build a separate facility specifically for after funeral luncheons and celebrations of life. Now, we realize that that the parking situation on a standalone building like this, we're not anywhere near meeting the requirements. But this is an accessory to the funeral home. We would not be having simultaneous large services in both facilities because our staff is going to need to be at both places, and we just don't have enough staff to do those type of things anyways. So we would make sure that we would schedule things accordingly so that we wouldn't be overlapping with 2 large services at the same time in 2 different buildings. We got to be able to share that parking, make sure we can accommodate for that. As you look at the application, it's under Green Lawn Professional Building. That's the current owner of that particular partial. We also, Mary Beth and I, own the Green Lawn Professional Building. So this facility doesn't really have anything to do with that. So once we get approval, we'll be coming back and changing the ownership of that partial to be as the same owners as the funeral home, same corporation. So that way it's all congruent as one. Okay. So and then as you look at the plan, if you have it in front of you, you'll notice that the buildings do not protrude any closer to the road than the ones around it. Right. So if we go further back than the duplex to our south, which is owned by my mom and dad, and it's about the same, if not a little bit further back than the Green Lawn Professional Building. So it's not like it's sticking out and protruding in front of those buildings at all. Randy, you have some more things to add?
We can talk about the variances a little bit.
Sir, if you could do me a favor and please state your name, address, and I'll swear you into the record as well.
Randy Smith, BSC Architects, 401 Front Street, Korea.
Thank you. Do you swear to affirm the statements you're about to make in front of this board of zoning and building appeals for the city of North Ridgeville are true as you shall answer unto God or prove the county's law for
I do.
please?
Okay, the first variance is the front parking. And my feeling was that we have front parking in the Green Lawn building, facing Green Lawn Avenue. And this is basically a continuation of that look anyway. So it established some continuity across that face of the building. Second.
Sorry, if I could, I'm sorry, if I could just interrupt for a moment. Is there any way you could step to the podium and speak in the mic? Because we do record all conversations. Sir, I'm sorry.
My apologies. Okay. So basically, we're trying to establish some continuity at the front of the building. I think the parking out in front does that for us. The Green Lawn building has parking facing Green Lawn. I think us having parking facing Green Lawn is amenable to that or complementary to that, I should say. So I think that's a fair request. The front yard setback, 75 feet, we're just cutting an angle across the building. The 9.5 feet is just on one corner. So I don't think that's too big of a deal. The 30-foot setback in the rear is fairly large, but that's in a vacant lot in the back. And we've already established a buffer strip across the back of that property. David and Scholar did that when they did that, did the duplex next door. They extended that buffer all the way across. Problem with this lot is that if you comply with all of the setback requirements, the buildable area left on the parcel is about 1,500 square feet. If you try to build on it, you probably end up with a building somewhere around 1,300 to 1,400 square feet, but kind of squared up. Just not economically feasible or usable as it stands right now. It's an empty lot. I think having a building that would be complementary to the other two buildings that are there would complete the B5 zoning and provide a nice little enclave or nice little compound there where everything is complementary and tied together. The side yard setbacks, we're okay on the south side. On the north side, we're asking for the variance. There is a 15-foot drainage easement along that side of the property, so nothing would be built or could be built in that 7.5 feet on the adjacent property. So we're looking at that as providing at least a 15 feet clear area, if not all on our property. The building itself, we're looking at doing a brick face building, it's 1 story. It would be complementary to the funeral home itself. I haven't matched the brick yet, but I have some pictures if you'd like to see those. It's basically a reddish brick building. We do all white trim. Basically try to tie it together with some of the detailing to the funeral home. The funeral home and the office building were treated slightly differently. So we're going to try to tie this back to the funeral home to establish that.
That will be complementary look, which we
Yeah. Try to make that problem, right? We've added the buffer strip along the south side to separate it from the residential properties. I think we had that covered. And I think we had everything else covered except for these variances that we're asking for.
Well, thank you. Well, I appreciate your presentation. You and Mr. Bogner did a great job explaining exactly what you're asking for this evening. And I have spent some time reading through and reviewing everything. I do have some comments that I'd like to go over with you gentlemen. Well, first off, this is a very unique parcel of property. And as Mr. Bogner mentioned, the B5 zoning really is more intended for businesses facing Center Ridge. And truthfully, the reason this board exists is for those rare occasions when it doesn't quite meet to ordinances that we have in place. And there's probably not a whole lot of lots that are P5 that don't face Center Ridge. So this is clearly one of those moments. Looking at your plan, I think it is a well thought out design. I mean, you try to maximize the space for buffers. You know, for example, it's clear that you're proposing to build the building as far north as possible.
Yes.
So the south to give even more land with a buffer strip, landscaping, and to keep you even further away from the residential. And I know that that was no accident. That was designed on purpose that way. Your design that you included that showed the essentially buildable window, if you will. Going by that, it essentially makes it impossible to develop anything on this property without a variance. Just simply looking at from the parking perspective.
Right.
There would be no way to still build without any variances for the building and still have room for adequate parking in the rear. So you're kind of stuck with, you know, what you have to work with, and did spend a lot of time on this. I can definitely tell it's a well thought out plan. But going through, you know, I think it is important that this does go hand in hand with the funeral side of the business. It's not a reception hall for weddings or you know, business dinners during the day and things like that. And even though that there is somewhat substantial requests on, you know, especially the parking, you have that covered, that the fact that you have all the parking across the street and directly next door with service accesses to that parking. And I also think it needs to be pointed out that most funerals are evenings and weekends, correct? And a lot of the businesses that are in the Green Lawn building are business daytime businesses. They're not evening businesses where there's competition for parking. So it does seem that there would be adequate amounts of parking, even though the request itself does sound pretty substantial and large. It's almost mitigated because of that fact. The sizing, like I mentioned, to have it in your window, and you said it was roughly about 1,500 square feet. That would be a very narrow building with a lot of space next to it that honestly, I think it would look out of place if you tried to build it in the approvable window. This, from a visual coherence standpoint, driving down Center Ridge, turning on the Green Lawn, the buildings are almost stepped down on the same pattern as the road has a turn. Right. Green Lawn, this is there with the turn, and then the duplex next to it is a little bit further out with the turn of the road. So visually, I think it would blend in just fine. Like I said, you kept it as far away from the residential as possible, and you know, even though there's 6 variances, they all kind of go hand in hand. You need them all. It's kind of all or nothing, to be honest with you. So normally on a situation like this, when there's multiple, we break them down and vote individually, but this is kind of an all or nothing type of request. So
we can't do it all.
Exactly. So I think this is something where we can just vote on in one and you know, take it from there. Yeah, I think you've crossed everything you possibly could, and I think it's a well thought out plan. Are there any questions or comments for any board members? Yes, please.
I do have some comments. I have some serious concerns, and that is, I understand that these are all on 3 separate parcels. I understand that one corporation owns this. But I also know at some point in time, things change and properties sell. So we have done a lot of times what seems to be the right decision at the right time, but later on, what is the saying? No good deed goes unpunished. This structure couldn't be built, correct, without the variances. Could this reception hall be built as a reception hall with that few parking spots? I'm guessing the answer is no, Mr. Person.
That size, no.
Okay. I don't know if we have the authority to make sure that this is only used
If I might speak to that.
Yes, sir.
Kim had mentioned about, excuse me, she had mentioned about it, the law department had suggested, and we are formalizing some type of a legal agreement, be it an easement, that would formalize that if for whatever reason this lot was no longer used by the funeral home, that the funeral home would still provide adequate parking for that facility. Okay, if there wasn't parking available, if it wasn't, somehow established elsewhere. Okay, so we're going to put that in writing. But this was talking with through emails today, from the law department. So I don't have that formalized. I haven't even talked to the attorney yet. But when we come to the planning commission, we would have that for that. So there would be a formal agreement providing for the additional parking for that lot.
And that would be a restriction or an easement that would be permanently attached to the property. So even if it's sold off like Celebration Center, the parking rights would transfer with the property.
And also, it's my understanding that if the use was changed, it was no longer being used by the funeral home or life celebration center, and we sold it or leased it out to somebody else to do something else with it, they would not be able to occupy it until they came back and got a certificate of what's it called, certificate of zoning. Yeah, so they wouldn't be able to
Because
use
the
it.
use was changed at that point, and they would have to come back in front of again.
Right, and to that point, Mr. Chair, this is only permitted to be a celebration center accessory to an existing funeral home. The district would not allow for exhibition halls or assembly areas. You couldn't just build like a facility for wedding receptions, for example. It can only be used in conjunction with that business. So if it should be sold, if it should cease to be a celebration center, it can't just be converted to another gathering type facility, because that wouldn't be permitted under the B5 district. They'd have to come back through, seek a certificate of zoning compliance, or come back to planning commission, depending on what they're requesting to do. So there'd be another opportunity at that point to look at the sufficiency of what it is they're doing versus parking or the other considerations that we might look at.
So in the short of it, the city would have some say so in the future if this ceased to be a celebration of life.
Yes.
structure. Mr. Person, do you have a question?
So sorry. So at this time, if this, and this is just going forward, so this couldn't at this point in time hold a wedding reception.
No.
It can only be related to a funeral. It can't be a baby shower. It can't be any of those things.
Right, it's going to be related to the funeral.
I understand too that we're just the zoning board, so we can't address safety issues of people crossing the street in the wintertime. I understand.
That was one of the reasons also wanted to have some parking in front of this facility. In case we had other these funerals, we don't want them having to walk over. So we thought with the limited parking we have over there, at least we could get the more senior attendees across the street safely.
And we did leave a space there. We eliminated 2 parking spaces for a turnaround, so that if all the parking spaces were full, somebody would be able to drop off their occupants in their car and then be able to drive across the street, park in a larger parking.
And also in conjunction with people being able to park in Greenwood parking as well.
Sure, right. We put in a sidewalk.
Yeah, we had decided.
There is a sidewalk here, or is there?
Yes.
It's in the plans.
It's going to be there. Okay.
But that would be a new.
This is the sidewalk that makes the
Yeah.
parking.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments from any board members? Anything from administration? Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak on behalf of this matter? Okay, you guys could step up one at a time, and just, have everyone stay on hand and us, unless we're going individually.
My name's Roger Noblet. I live at 7369 Green Lawn Drive.
Thank you. Do you swear upon the statements you're about to make upon this board of zoning and building appeals for the city of Ridgeville are true as you shall answer on God or on the as well?
Yes.
Thank you. Please, sir.
Okay, I've lived back here for a number of years. And as a resident, my largest concern is parking. There's been a number of times when parking from the funeral home has been clear into our addition, clear down on Annie and Green Lawn Drive. And so they're proposing another facility addition, which, you know, it does not have the ample parking as your own building department inspector noted. And you're just, to us, you're adding more congestion back there to already a, you know, bad situation. We can't do anything about the existing situation, but parking is inadequate. And there's been a number of times where they've, like I said, they've parked clear up and down our addition. And, you know, that just concerns me, safety issues. You know, people getting across the street. I know this board can't do anything about that as far as having a safety, you know, flashing light, a walkway there or something, but you know, everything's on hunky-dory. There's parking issues, and you know, it's not unusual when they have a large funeral there that there's parking on Annie and Green. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on behalf of this? So we'll have the hands go up. We're not going to come on. You please go tell me.
My name's Angela Finney. I live at 7620 Green Lawn Drive.
So do you swear from the statements you're about to make about this board of zoning and building appeals for the city of Ridgeville are true as you shall answer unto God or under the powers of law and perjury?
I do. Yeah, just like my fellow neighbor, my biggest concern is the parking issue. I mean, there's been times that we've come home late and some of the parking has been, they parked in front of the funeral home, which blocks the vision and view of people coming in and out of their driveway. I've almost been hit twice coming home. People thinking that I'm going into the funeral home, and I live in Green Lawn, that Cross Creek development, and I almost got 2 times cars almost hit me head on. And I'm very concerned that the facility that he's going to build is going to create even more parking issues, because if he has a big celebration of life ceremony, it's going to, just like my neighbor says, it's going to have parking all the way down into our development again, and the safety issues of people walking. I mean, it's very dark there. I mean, they would have to put more lighting, because right where his funeral home is, it's very dark. You can't see when you drive into the Green Lawn Drive at night right now. The visibility is very low, and it's very dangerous for people walking back and forth if they have big funerals, if they're parking over into the business development. And I'm also very concerned with construction. If this gets approved and the construction comes, there's one way in our development, one way, that's it. If emergency vehicles need to get in and their construction equipment's blocking that one way, we're screwed. I mean, if we have a lot of elderly people in our development, and I have a heart issue, and if I needed to call the ambulance and their construction company is blocking the only way that ambulance could get to me, you know, I'm dead, basically. And that is my concern. I'm gonna leave it at that.
Yes, sir.
My name is Jim Ross, I live at 7368 Green Lawn Drive.
Do you swear from the statements you're about to make a public support of zoning and building appeals for the city of Ridgeville are true as you shall answer as the county's law perjury? I give you.
I want to reiterate what our two neighbors said, but, and that's our biggest concern, I think, is the, parking and congestion. I mean, with the one way in and out, it does make it, difficult at times, and I understand sometimes that, funerals are, pretty large, congregation. A lot of people that, want to pay their respects, but it does make it difficult when there is a lot of traffic and parking up there, with the one way in and out. That's our biggest concern. That's all.
Thank you.
So, Michelle Allenson, I live at 7585 Greenlawn Drive. I second what
Hold
Angela
on 1 second, Sean. Do you swear from the statements you're about to make about the board of zoning and building appeals for the city of Ridgeville are true and you shall answer as provided under the county's law?
I do. I second what Angela said, what Roger said, what Bruce said. We're a single street, we're a no outlet. One way in, one way out. And then we have the little Annie Lane there too. They have a little cul-de-sac right beyond the entrance to our cross street development. So when there's a big funeral, it, because those cars can be parked all the way down, halfway down our street. People come down our street all the time trying to get onto 80. They end up going around the circle and then they leave. We walk all the time. Roger walks all the time. We know the neighborhood. And while I appreciate the celebration in the center, we might use it in the future. I think the size for the parking is not right. And I think I agree with what Angela said. Crossing the street there, you're gonna have people crossing the street. It's gonna be difficult. Emergency vehicles. I've worried, I don't work 9 to 5 anymore. I watch my grandchildren in my house. But I worry about if we have an emergency on our street with fire trucks, you're not leaving the neighborhood until they're done. So, because the street's not really wide enough for, they park, they just leave their vehicles where they leave them. And emergency vehicles need to get in and out, and that's a big thing.
Hello, my name is Tim Allenson. I live at 7585 Greenlawn Drive.
Tim, do you swear from the statements you're about to make about this board of zoning and building appeals for the city of Ridgeville are true and you shall answer as provided under the county's law perjury?
Yes, I do.
Please.
Okay, so looking at the map here, that's just to the south of where the Celebration of Life Center is going to be. There's a small island that is the northern terminus or line of our development. At that little island, the road is choked off. There was one side, like when you go to the right to get out, you go left. There's a choke right there. But this little island, you almost have to ride on the curb, the inner curb or the outer curb to get out. And when we have snow problems, there's an issue. It's happened at least twice since we've been there 3 years, where the size of the funeral has caused the parking situation. Again, I'm going to go ahead and parking. Where the attendees of the funeral home have parked almost down the middle island on Greenlawn Drive, and they've parked into that choke point. But I couldn't get into the neighborhood. I couldn't go into the right. I had to go around it to the left. So I'm driving on the wrong side of the road to get in my own neighborhood. Ditto to what they say about emergency vehicles in and out. I just think it could be opening up a can of worms here, and there are a lot of them on our street. Quite a few of them have called me an ambulance a few times for life-saving help, and I'm afraid if large funerals there and they can't get in, people are gonna have trouble. Okay. All right, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments from any of the audience members? So.
Minutes 6:05, Denise Drive, 139.
Sir, do you swear from the statements you're about to make from this board, is that making utility bills like truths, you shall answer? It's zero, there's no truths, you shall answer.
I do. I agree with your assessment of the plans, very detailed. You know, when things come before zoning, it's typically because there's some sort of hardship that, you know, the property owner has and how they want to develop it. And in this case, the hardship's really a lot of stuff. As I stated earlier, there's not much more you can do, and I think they've done a good job of trying to do what they want within the space that they have, in addition to keeping the flavor of the neighborhood the same. And I think that's important when things go before planning commission and this board. You know, we'd like to see new development look like the North Ridgeville that we'd like to see, and this certainly does. I don't live in the neighborhood. I would think, I know that Mr. and Mrs. Bogner, I would think that they would certainly work with the city as to the crossing the street issue. I think that that can be something that could be done. It's encouraging to me and to many others that someone who already has an established business here in North Ridgeville is willing to expand their business and work within all the limitations that they need to work with, put it on this space. They can put it somewhere else, maybe not in North Ridgeville. They make it much bigger and what have you, but you know, God love them for trying to work within this framework. And I think that they've checked all the boxes and how they've addressed all the variances. And I would just recommend approval of that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Before we move on, sir, you did have some numbers that you let respond to.
Yeah, I'd just like to talk about parking a little bit. The problem that everybody's having with parking is fuel services generate excessive traffic. This facility will not generate traffic by itself. This is tied to the fuel. Excuse me. This is tied to the funeral home. So the only time it's used is when there's funeral services. We're not increasing the traffic in this building. We've got 50 people at the funeral. We'll have 50 people come over to the Life Celebration Center. We're not going to have another 30 or 40 people coming to the Life Celebration and attend the funeral. It's not set up that way. So what we've done is actually, we've increased the available parking by 11 spaces here. It's not a big deal, but it is helpful, hopefully. And the facility itself is not adding to the problem.
Thanks.
I want to be in the neighborhood. We've always tried to accommodate the best we possibly can, and I didn't know that there was people blocking your island area there. You know? So if that happens again, please make us aware of it, and so we can go out and try and get those cars moved, because that's a safety issue, and we don't want that to be happening. So Angela, you got my cell phone number. You see it, call me. Okay. But you know, if not, you guys just call the funeral home. You don't even have to come in there. Just call us on the phone. We answer 24/7. We'll do everything we can to get that cleared out as quickly as we possibly can. And of course, we want to be a good neighbor, like I said, but we also want to make sure that there's adequate lighting and make sure that it's a safe place for people to come visit and so forth. So we'll make sure that there's plenty of lighting there to make sure it's safe. Okay. I know it's very dark around there most nights because we leave our parking lots lights off when we don't have visitations going on. Anything. We don't let it be, you know, having all big bright lights all the time every night. So we leave them off, and we only have the few lights on the building, and of course the street lights on any given night that we don't have business. And as Randy had mentioned, this is really we're adding parking to our current situation, okay? Because we're adding another 11 spaces that we didn't have before. So when we have visitations going on at the funeral home and that lot fills up, we have an agreement with the Green Lawn Building, it's in their leases that we can use that as overflow parking. And now we're adding an additional 11 spaces so that hopefully keeps people off the street, okay? I know that there's been a few occasions, such as when we had God forbid, a North Ridgeville police officer who passed away. And we had police cars coming from all over the state. And I know they parked all the way down. I think they were almost to the turnpike. Okay. Those are really unusual situations. And there's nothing that we can do to, be able to accommodate for those type of situations. So it is a public street. The police officers know that and they can park there, but it's not the okay. But we're really trying to do everything we can to make sure that we're providing enough parking for everybody. And the average funeral luncheon is about 45 people. Okay? That's about 20 cars. Okay, so there's not like it's something that's going to be filling up whole parking lots. Okay? And this is again, it's a complementary to the funeral home. So it's not like we're adding additional services because of this. It's just rather than going to another facility for a luncheon, they're coming back to the funeral. So it's not like they're, many times we use Tom's Country Place right now in Avon. We won't be going there as often. Just be coming back to a more convenient location right here. But it's not like we're doubling up our services because we have this facility. We're really just complimenting what we're really doing. But thank you for your concerns and your comments.
I would like to take a quick moment to address the concerns of the audience. This board, we are tasked with the responsibility of purely looking at Mr. Bruce pointed out, hardship from particular property, setbacks, parking, things like that. As far as parking on the street and safety, which are all extremely valid concerns, which is why I let those comments be said. It really has nothing to do with this board's determination. That's more planning commission, city council. So there are avenues to address that if this is to purchase tonight. But unfortunately, those aren't determining factors that this board is allowed to really put weight into, even though they are immensely important and safety and access for emergency vehicles. There's nothing more paramount than that. I completely agree. But unfortunately, those aren't things that the members of this board really to take into consideration. But I always allow the residents to voice their concerns no matter what, because more times than not, residents and an applicant can work things out just by talking. And the conversation that just happened this evening, if I was to run the meeting a little more strictly, I could have stopped that and said that that's not this board's business, but I want everyone to get along and work together in the future. So Mr. Boger does seem to be willing to work, and some of you have a cell phone. I'm sure you give everyone his cell phone number. Issues, and it's definitely working with him for years. And that also, as Mr. Booth pointed out, the hardship that this board looks at is the dimensions of this property. And there is legitimate hardship that they are faced with. So those are the things that are being looked at. So if this does go through this evening, and I'm not saying it will, but if it does, there are avenues to address your concerns with planning commission and the city council. And those are the appropriate places that they can make determinations on that. So this isn't just a one-stop shop where if it got approved tonight, it's getting built tomorrow. There's a lot more boards that have a lot more power than this one. We're the low man out of total. So we're just the very entry level. So planning commission is powerful, and so is city council. We're way down the list. So please take those concerns and talk at planning commission and council because they are valid. But it's unfortunately not something that this board is really able to consider for what's in front of us. Are there any other questions or comments from the board members?
Actually,
Yes.
I have a question. Kim, do you know if any variances were granted to funeral home for the parking?
I don't know. I don't have that record.
There were no variance granted. And then to clarify, and I'm just asking for my own, peace of mind. If we grant this, we have the right to put on conditions. We can ask for, and we can ask for deed restrictions. If for some reason, whatever we approved here, and it doesn't go forward with planning commission, it dies here. It doesn't go on. I just wanted to make sure that's what I thought, and I wanted to mention.
If I make the restriction or approval of the parking rights.
From a legal perspective, are we allowed to add a condition since this isn't a conditional use?
Yes. From a planning standpoint, yes, you can place conditions on variances.
I agree.
Sounds good. It's different than what we've been told in the past. but-
It is extremely different than what we've been, we're moving forward and we're going in a better direction.
Um,
So legal opinion is in this, and we also did receive an email from Assistant Law Director Tony Morgan. And I put that somewhere safe.
it's very simple.
Yeah, it is. Yes. Kim's paperwork too. Read it. Here we go, it's at the very bottom. So what Tony Morgan was suggesting, a deed restriction on the parcel that can limit that parcel only to uses associated with the life celebration activities of the funeral home, if that is the intent of the intent of PC, which I'm assuming she means planning commission.
Yes,
On the other hand, an easement on the funeral home parcel can allow for parking for the, and it's giving the parcel number for life celebration activities only, or it can be for any future allowed use of parcel ending in 193, depending on the language of the easement. Both or either can and should be recorded with the county and a copy supplied to planning. Planning commission approves this submission. It may choose to use either of the above restrictions. Using both would not make sense. It should clearly specify in its intentions.
Well, it sounds like that the applicant is already working with the city's law department on formulating that agreement, correct? And we're almost at that would be something that I assume that they would have in place before they got approval from planning and law council.
I understand, but it's kind of like the chicken and the egg. And I would just want to make sure that any variance that I approved was conditional upon either a deed restriction or an agreement in place.
It's always good to be safe.
So I want to make sure that that does happen. I don't want things to get, I don't want to have to defend this decision in 20 years. And I think that especially if you're going back into records and documentation that's on file, I think something that's a recorded deed or recorded easement would make me feel much more comfortable.
Sounds good.
Mr. Chair.
Yes,
Perhaps if you're considering a condition of that nature, you can leave it such that the recorded deed, easement, or other format as approved by the law department. So that if there's some different methodology that they find acceptable, that it's the same result, that there's that.
seems to be a great idea to state that.
and Law Department, did you have any suggestion on how you would like us to word that?
What's the intention of it's the intention to make sure that the new building is only used by the funeral home for those purposes, it doesn't, so expand.
Parking and what the structure is. Mr. Person, is there something you'd like to add?
Absolutely not. Okay, well, are there any other questions or comments from any board members? Is there anyone else in the audience who'd like to speak on behalf of this matter? Anything additional from the administration? Hearing none at this time, the chair will entertain a motion.
I would make a motion that we approve this on the condition that a deed restriction be in place or an easement that supports that. Because these are three different parcels that,
And I think we should add, as Kim mentioned, or a suitable agreement with the law.
yeah. That sound okay?
Sounds good to me. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Will the clerk please take roll?
Kane,
Yes.
Emerson? Yes. Silverton?
Yes.
Kimball?
Yes.
Motion carries.
We have a copy of here, Lisa. Thank you very much. Good to see you. I'll give this to you after the meeting. 30 seconds. Is there any other business come from the board this evening? Or any other this time to share this motion to adjourn all this? Yes.
It's not fun, but the courts, our house, how it's crossed. Through before, you just look at the resident saying like. It's hard.
So I get.
I mean.
Do you want me to come every time I get almost killed?
Just see you, so. I don't have a, tomorrow, Friday. We would like to. I just like, how long.